The crimson sunset painted the Arizona desert in fire as I stood on my porch, rifle in hand, surrounded by 30 mounted Navajo warriors. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Their faces were stern, painted for war, and their horses stamped impatiently, sending dust spiraling into the twilight air. I pulled my children closer, wondering how a simple act of mercy 2 days ago, giving water to a wounded stranger, had brought an army to my doorstep, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The truth is, kindness is never simple in a land where survival hangs by a thread, where water is more precious than gold, and where a woman alone must protect what's hers. My name is Emily Wilson, and this is the story of how one decision changed everything I thought I knew about courage, loyalty, and who we choose to call enemy in these unforgiving lands. The summer of 1885 was the driest anyone in Desert Springs could remember. My once promising alfalfa fields had withered to brittle stalks. The creek that divided my property had shrunk to a trickle, and the cattle were growing thin. 3 years. After my husband Thomas's death, I was beginning to wonder if I'd made a terrible mistake holding on to Sagebrush Ranch. "Mama, Ryder's coming," Lily called from inside the house where she was helping her younger brother Ben with his letters. At 8 years old, she'd become my second pair of eyes, growing up too fast since her father passed. I shaded my eyes against the merciless sun. A dust cloud approached from the eastern ridge, probably Richard Clayton and his men. Again. He'd been pressuring every small rancher in the valley to sell out, and as a widow with 2 young children, I was his favorite target. "Lily, take Ben to the root cellar," I said calmly, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "Stay there until I call you." "But Mama—" "Now, Lily, and remember what I taught you." She nodded solemnly, taking the small pistol from the high shelf, the one I'd taught her to use despite my own misgivings. A child shouldn't need to know such things, but this territory wasn't kind to the unprepared. I positioned myself on the porch, rifle visible, but not aimed. Clayton had 3 men with him this time. Hank, the butcher's son with a mean streak wider than the Rio Grande; Edwards, a former cavalryman discharged for reasons nobody discussed; and a stranger whose eyes darted everywhere like a coyote looking for weakness. "Afternoon, Mrs. Wilson," Clayton called with false cheer, his black gelding prancing sideways as they approached. His tailored suit seemed absurdly formal against the dusty backdrop. "This heat's something fierce, isn't it? Making you reconsider my offer, I hope." "My answer hasn't changed, Mr. Clayton." I kept my voice steady. "Sagebrush Ranch isn't for sale." Clayton's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Now, Emily, may I call you Emily? Be reasonable. Your water's drying up. Your cattle are dying. What will your children eat come winter?" "We'll manage. We always have." "Ah, but this drought isn't ending any time soon." He gestured toward the parched landscape. "My offer is more than fair, enough to set you up comfortably in town, maybe open a little dress shop or bakery. Something more suitable for a woman alone." The condescension in his tone made my fingers tighten around the rifle. "This land was my husband's dream, Mr. Clayton. It's my children's inheritance. Dreams don't feed hungry bellies," he said, his tone hardening, "and inheritances don't matter much to orphans." The threat hung in the air like gun smoke. Behind him, Hank shifted in his saddle, his hand resting near his holster. "You threatening me on my own property, Mr. Clayton?" "Merely stating facts. This territory's dangerous for those without proper protection. Indians, bandits, accidents. So many things can go wrong." He tipped his hat. "Think about my offer. I'll be back in 1 week for your answer." They turned their horses, but not before Clayton added, "Oh, and I heard the Navajo have been restless lately, moving beyond their usual hunting grounds. Might want to keep those children close." I watched them ride away, rage and fear battling inside me. Clayton wanted the water rights that came with my land, the underground spring that kept my well flowing even in drought. He'd already bought out the Hendersons to the north and Old Man Jeffries to the south. With my property, he'd control every water source between Copper Canyon and the territorial border. "Are they gone, Mama?" Lily called from the cellar door. She'd cracked open. "Yes, sweetheart, come on out." Ben rushed to hug my legs, his 6-year-old face serious. "Was it the bad men again?" I smoothed his sandy hair. "Nothing for you to worry about. Let's start supper." That night, after the children were asleep, I sat on the porch with my father's old journal and a lantern. Thomas and I had come west from Pennsylvania with dreams of building something lasting. The first years had been good. We'd built the house, dug the well, planted fields, and started a respectable herd. Then came the fever that took him in just 3 days, leaving me with a 5-year-old, a toddler, and a ranch I barely knew how to run. I'd learned, though. Learned to mend fences and birth calves and drive off wolves. Learned to track strays and break horses and shoot straight. But I hadn't counted on the drought, or on men like Clayton, who saw a woman alone as easy prey. The too distant howl of a coyote pulled me from my thoughts. Something else moved in the darkness beyond the corral, something larger. I raised the rifle, heart pounding. "Who's there?" I called, keeping my voice low enough not to wake the children. "I'm armed." A figure stumbled from the shadows, then collapsed to one knee. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, with long black hair, clutched his side where a dark stain spread across his buckskin shirt. His face, illuminated by my lantern, was streaked with dust and blood, but I recognized the distinctive silver and turquoise jewelry, the moccasins, the proud bearing. Navajo. My finger tensed on the trigger. Clayton's warning about restless. Tribes echoed in my mind, but the man made no threatening move. Instead, he raised an empty hand, palm forward. "Water," he gasped in English. "Please." In that moment, I made a choice that would change everything, though I couldn't have known it then. I lowered my rifle. "Stay there," I said, backing toward the house. I returned with my canteen and approached cautiously, expecting a trap. But no one else emerged from the darkness. The man drank deeply, water spilling down his chin in his desperation. When he finished, he looked up at me with eyes as dark and fathomless as a desert night. "Thank you," he said, his English clear though accented. "I am Daniel Yazzie." "You're hurt," I stated the obvious, gesturing to his side. He nodded grimly. 3 men. Ambush at the crossing. Clayton's men. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I asked, before I could stop myself. A flash of surprise crossed his face. "You know them?" "I know Clayton wants any excuse to bring in the cavalry against your people." I hesitated, then made another decision that defied all frontier wisdom. "Come inside. I'll tend that wound." Helping him to the barn seemed safer than bringing him into the house with my sleeping children. He leaned heavily on me, his breathing labored. By lantern light, I examined the wound. A bullet had grazed his side, tearing a nasty furrow through flesh, but hitting nothing vital. "You're lucky," I said, cleaning the wound with whiskey. He barely flinched. "What were you doing so far from your lands?" "This was our land before it was yours," he replied, but without hostility. "I was returning from a mission to speak with the Indian agent at Fort Whipple. Clayton's men were waiting at Silver Creek." I bandaged his side with strips of clean linen. "They killed your horse?" "I released him when I was hit. He'll find his way home." Daniel studied me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Why are you helping me?" It was a fair question. Most settlers would have shot first or sent for the sheriff at the very least. "My husband believed that we're measured by the mercy we show, not the fear we harbor," I said finally. and I've no love for Clayton or his schemes." Daniel nodded, slowly. "There are few white women who would aid a Navajo. There are few people of any kind who would aid me," I countered. "Yet here we are." I gave him jerky and more water, then showed him where he could rest in the hayloft. "You should be gone by morning," I warned. "My children don't need more trouble." "Your children have a mother of rare courage," he said. "I will remember this kindness." I locked the barn door from the outside, then returned to the house, wondering if I'd just made a terrible mistake. The next morning, I woke at dawn to find the barn door open and Daniel gone. The only evidence of his presence was the blood-stained bandages I'd discarded and a small turquoise bead left deliberately on the workbench. "Mama, whose blood is this?" Lily asked, finding me burning the bandages. "A wounded traveler needed help last night," I said, deciding on honesty. "He's gone now." Her eyes widened. "Was it an Indian, like Clayton warned about?" I knelt to her level. "Not everyone who looks different is a threat, Lily. Remember how the Johnsons help us with harvest? They're colored folks, and they're our friends. This man was Navajo, and he was hurt. Helping him was the right thing to do." She considered this with a child's directness. "Did you help him because Daddy would have?" My throat tightened. "Yes, and because it's who we are." We went about our chores, and by midday, I'd almost convinced myself that the encounter was the end of it. Then Sarah Martinez rode up from her family's small farm down the valley, her usually cheerful face drawn with worry. "Emily, thank God you're all right," she exclaimed, dismounting in a rush. "We heard shots last night near Silver Creek, and then Edwards was in town this morning, boasting about shooting a Navajo spy. He claimed the Red Devil was wounded but got away." She glanced anxiously at the house. "The children." "We're fine, Sarah. The spy was a man returning from official business with the Indian agent." I hesitated, then admitted, "He came here for help." Sarah crossed herself. "Santa Maria, you didn't." I patched him up. "He left before dawn." "If Clayton finds out—" "He won't," I interrupted, "unless someone tells him." Sarah's loyalty was never in question. Her family had been in the territory for generations, Spanish land grant holders before it became American, and they despised Clayton as much as I did. "Of course not. But Emily, they're saying Gabriel Begay and his warriors are on the move. If that man was connected to Begay—" She didn't need to finish. Gabriel Begay was a respected Navajo leader known for defending his people's lands fiercely. "What would you have had me do? Let him bleed out on my doorstep?" Sarah sighed. "No, you wouldn't be you if you had." She squeezed my hand. "Just be careful. Clayton's looking for any excuse." That evening I found myself checking and rechecking the rifle, peering into the gathering darkness more often than usual. The children sensed my unease, staying close as I prepared a simple supper of cornbread and beans. "Mama, is something bad coming?" Ben asked as I tucked him into bed. "No, sweetheart," I lied, smoothing his blanket. "Just a storm in the distance, nothing to fear." But as I sat alone on the porch that night, the weight of my isolation pressed down on me. The nearest neighbor was Sarah's family, 3 miles away. Sheriff Donovan in Copper Canyon was a good man, but the town was a half-day's ride. If trouble came, we'd face it alone. I must have dozed in my chair because the sound of hoofbeats jolted me awake. The moon had risen, casting silver light. Across the yard, I grabbed my rifle, heart pounding. Richard Clayton sat astride his gelding, alone this time, but no less menacing. "Evening, Mrs. Wilson," he called softly. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" I raised my rifle. "It's late for social calls, Mr. Clayton." "Just passing by." His smile was cold in the moonlight. "Interesting thing happened. My man Edwards shot a Navajo spy yesterday. Followed the blood trail quite a ways before losing it. Funny how it seemed to lead in this general direction." "Your point?" "My point, dear lady, is that harboring enemies of American citizens is a serious offense. Some might even call it treason. I kept my voice steady. Sounds like your man admitted to shooting someone without provocation. That's attempted murder where I come from. Clayton's smile vanished. Be careful, Mrs. Wilson. Accidents happen to stubborn women who don't know their place, especially those who choose savages over their own kind. Get off my land. He tipped his hat with mocking courtesy. 1 week, Mrs. Wilson, then I'll have this land, one way or another. He turned his horse and rode into the darkness. I barely slept that night, checking on the children repeatedly, starting at every sound. By morning, my nerves were frayed, but I put on a brave face as I sent Lily and Ben to gather eggs and feed the chickens. The day passed in watchful tension. I kept the children close, jumping at shadows. But as the sun began its descent toward the western mesas, painting the landscape in gold and crimson, I noticed something strange. The birds had gone silent. Even the cicadas had ceased their endless droning. That's when I saw them, cresting. The ridge to the east, first one rider, then another, then more, until the horizon seemed to fill with mounted figures. My blood froze. This wasn't Clayton with a few hired thugs. This was an army. Lily, Ben, inside now, I shouted, grabbing my rifle. They ran to me, eyes wide with terror. I ushered them onto the porch, positioning myself in front of them, rifle raised. The riders approached steadily, and as they drew closer, I could make out their features. Strong, proud faces beneath black hair, bodies adorned with traditional Navajo dress and ornaments, horses painted with symbols I didn't understand. In the lead rode a man I recognized from the wound, still visible at his side, Daniel Yazzie. Beside him was an older man with silver streaking his long hair, his bearing regal despite his years. 30 Navajo warriors surrounded my small ranch. House, their Mustangs pawing at the ground. No one spoke, no one moved. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring as Daniel and the older man dismounted and approached the porch. I kept my rifle steady, though my hands wanted to tremble. What do you want? Daniel raised his empty palms in the same peaceful gesture he'd made 2 nights before. Emily Wilson, this is Gabriel Begay, elder of my people. The older man stepped forward, his gaze direct but not unkind. The woman who gives water to the wounded has no need for weapons among friends. Friends? I looked at the circle of stern warriors, their silent Mustangs, the fading light glinting off metal, not weapons. I realized suddenly, but tools and gifts. Behind Gabriel, I noticed for the first time that many of the riders carried bundles. One led a string of 3 extra horses. I don't understand, I said, lowering my rifle slightly. Gabriel Begay smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. My nephew told me of your courage and kindness. He also spoke of the threats you face. Daniel stepped forward. We have come to repay a debt, Emily Wilson, and perhaps to forge an alliance that will benefit us both. As the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in flames, I stood on my porch, surrounded by Navajo warriors, not as enemies, but as something I never expected to find in this harsh territory. Allies. As darkness settled over Sagebrush Ranch, Gabriel Begay explained his proposition. The Navajo needed allies among the settlers, and I needed protection from Clayton's schemes. The bundles carried by his warriors contained dried meat, corn, beans, and medicinal herbs, gifts to help us through the drought. The 3 extra horses were strong Mustangs bred for endurance in desert terrain, more valuable than gold in these parts. Our people have traded with honest settlers before, Gabriel said as we sat around my kitchen table, his warriors making camp at a respectful distance from the house. Lily and Ben peeked from their bedroom doorway, curiosity gradually replacing fear. But this territory grows crowded with men who see only what they can take. From you, from us. Clayton isn't acting alone, I said, pouring coffee for my unexpected guests. There's talk of a railroad spur coming through the valley. Those with water rights will control where it goes. Daniel nodded, his dark eyes reflecting the lamplight. The agent at Fort Whipple confirmed this. The railroad brings more soldiers, more settlers. Our reservation boundaries shrink with each new treaty. Gabriel studied me with eyes that seemed to carry the wisdom of ages. You stand alone against forces that would crush you. We stand against the same enemy. Perhaps together we find strength. My practical nature surfaced through my astonishment. What exactly are you proposing? An alliance, Gabriel replied simply. We help protect your land from Clayton and his men. You allow us hunting rights in your eastern canyons and safe passage along Silver Creek. I considered his words carefully. The canyons are yours to hunt. They're too rocky for my cattle anyway, and I've never prevented anyone from using the Creek. But this alliance, how would it work? My warriors will patrol your boundaries, Daniel explained. We'll teach you our methods of conserving water through the drought. Our healer has knowledge of desert plants that can sustain your cattle when grass fails. He hesitated. In return, we ask that you speak for us in town when necessary. Many there respect you. It was an unexpected compliment. Since Thomas's death, I'd felt invisible in Copper Canyon, just another widow struggling to survive. Not everyone would call an alliance with the Navajo respectable, I said dryly. Gabriel's weather-worn face creased in a smile. Respectable rarely changes the world, Mrs. Wilson. I looked at my children, still watching wide-eyed from the doorway. What future would they have if Clayton took our land? What lessons would they learn if I surrendered without a fight? And what kind of example would I set if I rejected help based on fear and prejudice? It seems we have an agreement, I said, extending my hand. Gabriel clasped it firmly, his calloused palm against mine, sealing a pact that defied the accepted order of our divided territory. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without waking to check my rifle. The knowledge that Navajo warriors guarded my boundaries brought an unexpected peace. At dawn, I found most of the warriors gone, but Daniel remained with 4 others. They moved with quiet efficiency, already repairing the corral fence that had been broken for weeks. Ben watched them with unabashed fascination, while Lily maintained a cautious distance. Your boy has questions, Daniel observed as I brought water to the workers. Many questions. I smiled. Ben's always been curious about everything. His father was the same way. Curiosity is a gift from the Creator, Daniel said. If it pleases you, I would show him how we track animals, find water in dry places. The offer surprised me. You'd teach him. Knowledge shared strengthens both giver and receiver. He glanced at Lily, who was pretending not to listen. Your daughter, too, if she wishes. Before I could respond, hoofbeats sounded from the road. Sarah Martinez approached, her expression shifting from shock to alarm at the sight of Navajo men on my property. "Emily!" she called, reining in her horse at a safe distance. "Are you—" She broke off, clearly uncertain how to ask if I was being held against my will. "It's all right, Sarah," I assured her, walking to meet her. "These men are here as allies." Sarah dismounted, her dark eyes wide with disbelief. "Allies? Emily, have you lost your mind? If people in town hear about this, then they hear," I interrupted firmly. "Clayton came last night, threatening me again. He knows someone wounded came here. He's going to use it against me regardless." Daniel approached slowly, hands visible. "Your friend fears for you," he observed. "That speaks well of her loyalty." Sarah stiffened, her hand instinctively moving to the small knife she kept in her belt, a habit from growing up on the frontier. "And what does the Navajo know of loyalty to white settlers?" "About as much as settlers know of loyalty to the Navajo," he replied evenly, "which is why rare friendships matter more." I explained the alliance to Sarah, whose expression gradually shifted from skepticism to reluctant understanding. The Martinez family had their own troubles with Clayton, who coveted their orchards and ancient water rights. My father always said the enemy of my enemy is my friend, she conceded finally. But this is dangerous, Emily. Staying alone was more dangerous, I countered. Will you stand with me in this? Sarah sighed, then nodded. The Martinez family doesn't abandon friends, but you should know there's talk in town. Edwards is claiming Indians stole cattle near Silver Creek. Sheriff Donovan isn't believing it yet, but with tensions already high. Daniel and I exchanged concerned glances. Clayton was moving faster than expected, manufacturing excuses to bring force against both me and the Navajo. We should speak with your sheriff, Daniel suggested, before falsehoods take root. A Navajo riding into copper. Canyon would be asking for trouble, Sarah warned. Then I'll go, I decided. Sheriff Donovan knows me. He respected Thomas. I'll tell him about Clayton's threats directly. Daniel shook his head. Not alone. Clayton's men will be watching the roads. I'll accompany her, Sarah offered unexpectedly. 2 women traveling together will draw less attention than one with a Navajo escort. It was settled. I spent an hour showing Lily how to manage things in my absence, though I planned to return by nightfall. Daniel assigned 2 warriors to guard the ranch, positioning them in the hills where they could observe without being seen. As Sarah and I prepared to leave, Ben tugged at my skirt. Mama, why don't people like the Navajo? Mr. Daniel is nice. He showed me how their horses understand whispers. Out of the mouths of children, I knelt to his level. People fear what? They don't understand, Ben, and fear makes them cruel sometimes. That's silly, he declared with a child's simple logic. You just have to talk to them, and then you understand. If only the world worked with such clarity. I hugged him tightly, then mounted up for the ride to Copper Canyon. The town appeared unchanged as Sarah and I rode in. The same dusty main street lined with false-fronted buildings, the same mix of hopeful settlers and hard-bitten prospectors. Yet I felt different, as though my alliance with the Navajo had marked me somehow, making me an outsider in a place I'd called home for years. Sheriff Mike Donovan was a fair man who'd fought for the Union in the war, then come west seeking a quieter life. His office was sparse but orderly, much like the man himself. He looked up from his paperwork as we entered, his graying mustache twitching in greeting. Mrs. Wilson, Mrs. Martinez, wasn't expecting ladies to grace my office today. He stood, offering chairs. What brings you into town? I decided on directness. I'm here about Richard Clayton, Sheriff. He's been threatening me, trying to force me to sell my ranch. Donovan's expression sobered. Threatening how, exactly? Telling me accidents happen to stubborn women, saying orphanages are hard, places for children, having his men patrolling my boundaries. I met his gaze steadily. 2 nights ago, one of his men, Edwards, shot someone near Silver Creek, a Navajo man on legitimate business with the Indian agent. The sheriff's eyebrows rose. That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Wilson. Clayton himself came to my property and essentially admitted it. Did this wounded man come to your ranch? Donovan asked shrewdly. I'd known this question would come. Yes. I gave him water and bandaged his wound. He left by morning. Donovan sighed, rubbing his forehead. Emily, I understand your situation truly. Thomas was a good man, and he'd be proud of how you've managed. But helping an Indian right now, with tensions what they are. The tensions are being manufactured by Clayton, Sarah interjected. Everyone knows he wants control of all the water from here to the territorial line before the railroad announces its route. The sheriff nodded slowly. I don't disagree, but my jurisdiction is limited. Clayton has powerful friends in Phoenix and Santa Fe. So he's free to threaten women and shoot people without consequences? I asked, my frustration mounting. I didn't say that. Donovan leaned forward. I'll speak to Clayton, make it clear that threats against you and your children won't be tolerated. As for the shooting, without the victim coming forward, the victim would be arrested the moment he set foot in town, Sarah pointed out. Probably so, the sheriff admitted. Look, I'll do what I can to keep the peace, but Mrs. Wilson, I strongly advise you to consider Clayton's offer. This territory is changing. The days of small independent ranches are numbered. His words stung like a slap. My husband died believing in the promise of this land, Sheriff. I won't dishonor his memory by surrendering it to a man like Clayton. As we left the sheriff's office, I noticed Edwards lounging outside the saloon across the street. His smirk told me our presence in town had already been reported to Clayton. We should get supplies and leave, Sarah murmured. I don't like the way he's watching us. We hurried to the general store, where the proprietor's wife, Mrs. Hollister, greeted us with curious concern. Emily Wilson, we've been worried about you out there all alone, she fussed, though her eyes held calculation rather than warmth. Especially with all this Indian trouble brewing. What Indian trouble would that be, Mrs. Hollister? I asked, selecting coffee and sugar. Why, everyone's talking about cattle being run off, signals seen in the hills. She lowered her voice. Mr. Clayton himself told my Herbert that the Navajo are planning something big, said they've been seen where they don't belong. Interesting, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. My cattle are all accounted for, and the only person threatening me has been Mr. Clayton. Mrs. Hollister's expression cooled. Well, I'm sure Mr. Clayton only has the community's best interests at heart. Such a forward-thinking businessman. Did you know he's donating land for a new schoolhouse, says education is the future of the territory? The manipulation was so transparent it would have been laughable if it weren't so effective. Clayton was positioning himself as the town's benefactor, while painting me as either a victim to be pitied or an obstacle to progress. We finished our shopping quickly, feeling the weight of curious stares. As we loaded our supplies, Edwards pushed away from the saloon and sauntered toward us. Ladies, he drawled, thumbs hooked in his belt. Heard you've been spreading tales about me shooting Indians. Now, why would you do that? Perhaps because you were boasting about it yesterday, Sarah replied coolly. Edward's smile didn't reach his eyes. Just doing my civic duty, protecting our community from savages. Mr. Clayton would be mighty disappointed to hear you're taking their side, Mrs. Wilson. Mr. Clayton's disappointment means nothing to me, I said, mounting my horse. And if you come onto my property again, Edwards, I'll shoot you myself. His laughter followed us as we rode out of town, but I noticed he made no move to follow. Clayton was too smart for direct confrontation in public. His methods were more insidious. Isolation, intimidation, turning the community against those who resisted him. We were halfway back to Sagebrush Ranch when Sarah spotted dust rising behind us. Riders, she warned, moving fast. My heart raced as we urged our horses to a gallop, taking a side trail that led through a narrow wash. The riders followed, gaining ground. There were 4 of them, all Clayton's men. We can't outrun them, Sarah shouted over the pounding hooves. Head for the box canyon ahead. It narrows. They'll have to come through single file. It was our only chance. We raced toward the canyon entrance, its high walls offering both trap and protection. Once inside, we dismounted at a bend where the passage narrowed to barely the width of a horse. Sarah drew her knife, and I leveled my rifle at the entrance. The riders slowed, realizing the disadvantage of following us into the confined space. Hank took the lead, his horse nervous in the tight quarters. Now, ladies, he called, no need for this to get unfriendly. Mr. Clayton just wants a word. Mr. Clayton knows where I live if he wants to talk, I replied, the rifle steady in my hands. Thing is, Mrs. Wilson, he's concerned about reports of Indians on your property. Hank's false concern couldn't mask the menace beneath. We're just checking on your welfare, like good neighbors. My welfare is fine without your concern. I said coldly. Now turn around and tell Clayton I'll be ready for him when he comes. And for his answer, all of you. The standoff stretched taut as wire. I knew they were calculating whether they could rush us in the narrow space, whether I would actually pull the trigger. I was wondering the same thing myself. The sharp cry of a hawk echoed overhead, except I realized with a rush of relief that it wasn't a hawk. It was a signal. From the rim of the canyon, shadows moved against the sky. Navajo warriors positioned. Themselves along the edge, arrows nocked, watching silently. Hank saw them too. His face paled beneath his weathered tan. "You've made a mistake siding with them, Mrs. Wilson," he said, backing his horse carefully. "A mistake that'll cost you everything." "The only mistake was thinking I would surrender what's mine," I answered. "Now go." They retreated, throwing nervous glances at the warriors above. When they were out of sight, Daniel and 2 others descended into the canyon to join us. "You were following us?" I asked, lowering my rifle with shaking hands. "Gabriel suspected Clayton would make a move. Once he knew you'd gone to town," Daniel explained. "We kept our distance to avoid drawing attention, but stayed close enough to help if needed." The reality of what had nearly happened hit me suddenly. If the Navajo hadn't been there, would Clayton's men have harmed us? Killed us? Made it look like an Indian attack? The thought made my knees weak. Sarah voiced what I couldn't. They wouldn't have let us reach the ranch with warnings about their plans. Daniel nodded grimly. "Clayton moves faster than we anticipated. We should return quickly. The children will be worried." The mention of Lily and Ben sent fresh fear coursing through me. We mounted up and rode hard for Sagebrush Ranch, the Navajo warriors keeping pace effortlessly on their Mustangs. As we crested the final ridge overlooking my property, I gasped in horror. Smoke rose from the direction of the barn, a dark column staining the late afternoon sky. "No!" I dug my heels into my horse's flanks, racing down the slope with reckless speed. Daniel pulled alongside me, his face taut with concern. "The children are safe," he shouted over the drumming hooves. 2 of our warriors remained with them. The barn was fully engulfed by the time we reached the ranch yard. 6 Navajo warriors formed a protective circle around Lily and Ben, who stood huddled together watching their home burn. I flung myself from my horse and ran to them, gathering them into my arms with frantic relief. "Are you hurt? What happened?" I demanded, checking them for injuries. "Men came," Lily explained, her voice unnaturally steady for an 8-year-old. 4 of them. They said they were looking for stolen cattle, but Mr. Runs with Thunder said they were lying. One of the warriors stepped forward. "They carried firewater. When we refused to let them search, they grew angry. They set fire to the barn, thinking we would be forced to confront them." His expression was stoic, but I sensed his frustration. "We chose to protect the children rather than fight." "You did right," I assured him, though my heart ached at the loss of the barn, and with it, our winter hay, tools, and the wagon Thomas had rebuilt himself. I turned to my daughter. "Lily, did you recognize any of the men?" She nodded solemnly. "The one with the scar on his chin. He works for Mr. Clayton. Edwards, of course." "This goes beyond threats now," Sarah said, dismounting beside me. "They've destroyed your property." "They meant to provoke a conflict," Daniel observed. "If our warriors had fought them, they would have claimed self-defense against savage attackers." I watched the barn, the heart of any working ranch, collapse. In a shower of sparks, anger rose in me, hot and clarifying as the flames. Clayton thought burning my barn would break me, force me to accept his offer out of desperation. He didn't understand that every attack only strengthened my resolve. "They won't stop with the barn," I said, my voice hardening. "Clayton wants a war, with me, with the Navajo, with anyone who stands in his way." Gabriel Begay had approached silently, his lined face solemn in the firelight. "What will you do, Emily Wilson?" I looked at my children, at Sarah, at the Navajo, who had become unlikely allies, and made my decision. We're going to give Clayton exactly what he wants, a confrontation, but not the one he's expecting. As night fell, we gathered in my kitchen to form a plan. The children had been settled in their room with one of the Navajo women, a gentle-faced weaver named Morning Sky, who told them stories to distract from the day's trauma. "Clayton believes he's isolated you," Gabriel observed, his fingers tracing patterns on the wooden table. "He thinks the town will turn against you for associating with us." "Most already have," I admitted. "Even Sheriff Donovan urged me to sell, though he promised to speak to Clayton about the threats." Sarah scoffed. "Words won't stop a man like Clayton." "No," Daniel agreed, "but exposure might. His power comes from appearing respectable to some while intimidating others." An idea began forming in my mind. What if we could show the town who Clayton really is? "How?" Sarah asked, skeptically. "His men burned your barn, but you have no proof it was on his orders." "Not yet," I said slowly. "But Clayton's coming here in 5 days for my answer about selling the ranch. What if we give him an opportunity to reveal his true nature in front of witnesses?" Gabriel's weathered face creased in a smile. "You have a warrior's mind, Emily Wilson." We talked late into the night, refining the plan, accounting for every possibility we could imagine. It was dangerous, perhaps foolhardy, but I saw no alternative. Clayton would never stop until he had what he wanted, and I refused to surrender my children's inheritance without a fight. The next morning brought clear skies and hard work. The Navajo warriors helped salvage what little could be recovered from the barn's ashes. I was surprised to discover how much practical knowledge they shared about desert survival, techniques for storing water, growing drought-resistant plants, managing cattle on minimal grazing. "Your methods are different from what Thomas and I learned back east," I remarked to Daniel, as he showed me how the Navajo constructed water caches. "We were always fighting the land instead of working with it." "The desert teaches patience and respect," he replied. "Those who fight it perish. Those who listen survive." Like my alfalfa fields, I realized. They're failing because they need more water than this land can naturally provide. Daniel nodded. "With your permission, we could show you plants that thrive with little water but still feed cattle. Not as rich as your eastern grasses, but they endure." This exchange of knowledge became the pattern of the next few days. While we prepared for Clayton's return, the Navajo shared generations of desert wisdom, and I offered what I could in return: my tools, my stock, my understanding of the white settlers' laws and customs. Lily and Ben blossomed under this unusual arrangement. My cautious daughter gradually opened up to Morning Sky, learning traditional weaving techniques. Ben followed Daniel everywhere, soaking up knowledge about tracking and the desert's hidden resources. I watched their easy acceptance of people they'd been taught to fear, and felt ashamed of my own initial suspicions. On the evening of the 3rd day, an unexpected visitor arrived. Sheriff Donovan rode in alone, his expression grave as he took in the sight of Navajo warriors openly working alongside me on repairs to the corral. "Mrs. Wilson," he greeted me, dismounting stiffly. "I see the rumors are true. If the rumors say I found allies against Clayton's intimidation, then yes," I replied, setting down the post-hole digger I'd been using. Donovan surveyed the burned remains of the barn. "I heard about the fire. Clayton's men are claiming it was an accident, a cooking fire that spread when they stopped to rest on the public trail." "The public trail that happens to run through my private property?" I asked incredulously. "Did they explain why they were here at all, or why only my barn caught fire when there's not another scorch mark on the ground?" The sheriff removed his hat, running a hand through his thinning hair. Emily, I've known you since you and Thomas first arrived. You're a good woman in a difficult position. But this arrangement with the Navajo, you're playing a dangerous game. I didn't. Start this game, Sheriff. Clayton did when he decided my land was his for the taking. Clayton came to see me yesterday, Donovan continued. Said he's concerned for the safety of everyone in the valley with hostile Indians congregating on your property. He's talking about forming a citizens' committee for protection. A lynch mob, you mean? I said bitterly. I won't let it come to that, the sheriff assured me, but my authority only stretches so far. If the territorial governor gets reports of Indian troubles, he could send in the cavalry. Daniel had approached silently, standing just behind me. We are on treaty-protected hunting grounds, he said calmly. Helping a friend repair her ranch violates no law. Donovan studied him with a lawman's assessing gaze. You must be the one Edwards shot. I am Daniel Yazzie, nephew of Gabriel Begay. And yes, I was returning from official business with the Indian agent when Edwards and others ambushed me without provocation. Why were Clayton's men looking for you specifically? The sheriff asked shrewdly. Daniel glanced at me before answering. Because I witnessed something Clayton doesn't want known. While meeting with the agent, I saw documents, a map of the planned railroad route. It doesn't follow the path Clayton has been claiming when pressuring ranchers to sell. The railroad has no interest in most of the land he's acquired. This revelation stunned me. Then why is he so determined to get my ranch? The water. Partly, Daniel nodded, but also because the true route runs directly through your eastern canyons, the very land where our treaty allows us hunting rights. The pieces suddenly aligned in my mind. Clayton's trying to control both the water and the actual railroad path. Once he owns it, he'll announce the new route and sell at a massive profit, while ensuring the Navajo are pushed further from our ancestral lands, Daniel added grimly. Sheriff Donovan's expression had grown increasingly troubled. That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof? The agent showed me the maps, Daniel replied. Whether he would admit this to you is another matter. Many Indian agents are easily influenced by men with Clayton's wealth. The sheriff considered. This information, his weathered face revealing the internal struggle between duty and politics. Finally, he sighed. I can stall Clayton's Citizens Committee for a few days at most. After that, I can't promise what will happen. That's all I need, I assured him. Clayton's coming for my answer in 2 days. By then this will be resolved, one way or another. Donovan looked skeptical but nodded. I hope you know what you're doing, Emily. He settled his hat back on his head. For what it's worth, Thomas would be proud of your grit. As he rode away, I felt the weight of the coming confrontation settling on my shoulders. Our plan was risky, dependent on Clayton, behaving exactly as we predicted. If we miscalculated, I could lose everything, my ranch, my freedom, possibly even my children. That night, unable to sleep, I sat on the porch steps watching the vast canopy of stars. The desert night was alive with sounds, coyotes calling, in the distance, the soft nickering of horses, the whisper of wind through sagebrush. This land that had seemed so alien when we first arrived had become home in ways I hadn't fully appreciated until now. You should rest, Daniel's voice came from the darkness. He moved with such natural silence that I hadn't heard his approach. Tomorrow we must prepare for Clayton's arrival. I know, I sighed. I'm just wondering if I'm doing the right thing, risking so much on this plan. He sat beside me, a respectful distance between us. Doubt walks with courage like shadow with light. One cannot exist without the other. Navajo wisdom, I asked with a small smile. My mother's wisdom, he corrected. She married against her family's wishes, chose love over tradition. She understood difficult choices. This glimpse into his personal history intrigued me. Your father wasn't Navajo? He was Mexican, a trader who traveled between Santa Fe and our territories. When they married, neither culture fully accepted them. Daniel's voice held old pain. They created their own path, taught me to walk in multiple worlds. "Is that why you were chosen to speak with the Indian agent?" I asked. He nodded. "I understand the white man's ways, speak his language." Gabriel saw value in this, even when others called me half-blood. He turned to look at me, his expression thoughtful in the starlight. "Your children will also walk between worlds now. They've touched our ways, learned our stories. It will change them." The observation startled me with its truth. Already I could see the change in Lily and Ben, a new confidence, an expanded understanding of the world beyond settlers' boundaries. "I hope it makes them better," I said softly, "more compassionate, wiser." "They have a mother who gave water to an enemy," Daniel replied. "They will learn compassion by your example." The compliment warmed me in the cool night air. I suddenly realized how much I'd come to value Daniel's quiet strength, his careful words, his unwavering loyalty to both his people and our unlikely alliance. "I never thanked you properly," I said, "for bringing Gabriel, for helping us. You risked everything." "As did you when you lowered your rifle that night," he countered. "Courage recognizes itself in others." Our conversation drifted into comfortable silence as we watched the stars slowly wheel overhead. Tomorrow would bring confrontation and danger, but tonight, in this peaceful moment, I found unexpected certainty. Whatever happened with Clayton, this alliance, this friendship with the Navajo, had already changed everything. The desert had taught me its most valuable lesson. Survival comes not from strength alone, but from finding connection in the most unlikely places. Dawn broke across the eastern mesas with fingers of golden light as I stood in my doorway watching the Navajo warriors prepare. They painted their horses with sacred symbols, lightning bolts for speed, arrows for protection, circles representing the endless cycle of life. Gabriel supervised the preparations, his weathered hands mixing pigments with the precision of long practice. "The symbols connect horse and rider in purpose," he explained when he noticed my interest. "They become one spirit, facing danger together." Sarah Martinez had arrived before sunrise, bringing supplies and news from town. Clayton had been busy, she reported. The saloon buzzed with talk of Indian troubles and the widow who'd gone native. Respectable women crossed the street to avoid Sarah herself, simply for being my friend. "They're sheep following a wolf," she said bitterly. "Even the newspaper editor is printing Clayton's lies about Navajo raids." It stung to hear how quickly my neighbors had turned against me, though I'd expected nothing less. 5 years of living and working alongside them counted for little against fear and prejudice. "What about Sheriff Donovan?" I asked, pouring her coffee at my kitchen table while Lily helped Ben dress for the day. "Standing firm for now, but he's one man against Clayton's money and influence." Sarah studied me over the rim of her cup. "Are you certain about this plan, Emily? There's still time to reconsider." The question echoed my own midnight doubts, but morning had brought clarity. Clayton won't stop until he has everything he wants. If we don't make our stand now, there won't be another chance. Our plan was both simple and desperately complicated. When Clayton arrived for my answer about selling the ranch, he would find me apparently alone and vulnerable. The Navajo would remain hidden until needed. Sarah would have ridden to town with a message for specific trusted individuals, the newspaper editor's daughter, who despised her father's corruption, a retired judge whose sense of justice remained uncorrupted by Clayton's bribes, and Sheriff Donovan himself. The message would bring them to Sagebrush Ranch to witness whatever unfolded, hopefully catching Clayton revealing his true methods and motives when he believed only I could hear. "The most dangerous element is timing," Daniel had explained during our planning. Too early, and Clayton will maintain his public mask. Too late. He hadn't needed to finish the thought. Morning passed in tense preparation. The children would stay with Morning Sky in a sheltered cave a mile from the ranch, close enough to return quickly if all went well, far enough for safety if things went badly. I packed their small bags, including Lily's wooden horse that Thomas had carved and Ben's favorite book of adventure stories. Listen to Morning Sky, I instructed as I knelt before them. Stay hidden until either I or Daniel comes for you. What if nobody comes? Lily asked, her young face serious beyond her years. The question pierced my heart. Someone will come, I promised, praying it was true. But if evening falls and no one has arrived, Morning Sky will take you to Sarah's family. Ben wrapped his arms around my neck, his small body warm against mine. Don't worry, Mama. The Navajo are our friends now. They'll protect us like they protected Daniel. His innocent faith both strengthened and terrified me. I embraced them fiercely, memorizing the feel of them in my arms, the scent of their hair, the sound of their voices. Then I watched them ride away with Morning Sky, Lily straight-backed. On her pony, Ben secured before the Navajo woman on her paint mare. By midday, all was ready. The Navajo warriors had withdrawn to predetermined positions, some in the hills overlooking the ranch, others concealed in the dry creek bed, a few inside the house itself, hidden in the root cellar, accessible through a trapdoor in my bedroom floor. Sarah had departed for town, carrying our carefully worded messages. Daniel was the last to leave my side. He would command the warriors positioned in the hills, directing their movements through the silent sign language his people had perfected over generations of hunting. Remember, he said, his dark eyes holding mine with unexpected intensity. Clayton must believe you are alone and afraid. Let him reveal himself fully before we move. I understand. I fought to keep my voice steady. He hesitated, then reached into a pouch at his waist and withdrew something that glinted in the sunlight. Among my people, we believe certain objects carry power, not as your priests speak of magic, but as vessels for courage and protection. He held out a silver and turquoise bracelet, its design intricate and beautiful. My mother wore this when facing her family's rejection. Its strength now belongs to you, Emily Wilson. Before I could protest such a valuable gift, he clasped it around my wrist, his fingers warm against my skin. We will be watching, he promised. You will not stand alone. Then he was gone, moving silently across the yard to where his painted Mustang waited, disappearing into the landscape with a horseman's fluid grace. I returned to the house, changed into my best dress, not from vanity but calculation. Clayton respected wealth and position. Though faded, the blue cotton with its delicate embroidery was a reminder of my Eastern education, my civilized background. I also wore the silver cross my mother had given me, alongside Daniel's bracelet, two symbols of faith from different worlds. At precisely 2 o'clock, the time Clayton had specified in his last visit, dust rose on the horizon. I positioned myself on the porch, a shotgun visible but not in my hands, resting against the wall nearby, enough to suggest caution but not outright hostility. 4 riders approached, Clayton in the lead on his black gelding, followed by Edwards and 2 men I recognized as businessmen from Copper Canyon, Porter, who owned the bank, and Henderson, a cattle buyer known for shady dealings. Clayton's respectable witnesses, no doubt, brought to legitimize whatever transpired. Mrs. Wilson, Clayton called as they dismounted, I trust you've had sufficient time to consider my generous offer. His smile was smooth as worn leather, his suit immaculate despite the dusty ride. Only his eyes betrayed his true nature, cold and calculating as a desert rattlesnake. I've considered it, I replied, remaining on the porch rather than descending to greet them, and I have questions before giving my answer. Clayton ascended the steps, uninvited, forcing me to step back or risk his unwelcome proximity. The other men followed, creating a half-circle that effectively trapped me against the house. Questions? Of course. Clayton's tone was indulgent, as though humoring a child. Ask anything you wish. Why did your men burn my barn? The directness of my query momentarily startled him, but he recovered quickly, turning to his companions with an expression of exaggerated confusion. My dear Mrs. Wilson, what an extraordinary accusation. My men were nowhere near your property until this moment. Edwards was seen here by multiple witnesses, I persisted. The day before yesterday, while I was in town, Edwards spat over the porch railing. Lying Navajo witnesses, you mean? Everyone knows you can't trust an Indian's word. I met Clayton's gaze steadily. My 8-year-old daughter identified you specifically, Mr. Edwards. Are you calling her a liar as well? A flicker of unease crossed Clayton's features. He hadn't expected me to confront them so directly. Children are impressionable, easily confused in traumatic situations. If there was a fire, I assure you, my employees had nothing to do with it. Like they had nothing to do with shooting a Navajo man near Silver Creek, I pressed. Or threatening me on the road back from town? Clayton's smile hardened. Mrs. Wilson, these wild accusations suggest you're under considerable strain. Perhaps the loss of your husband has affected your judgment more than we realized. I felt a surge of anger at his condescending tone, but forced myself to remain calm. We needed him to reveal more than simple denials. My judgment is perfectly sound, I replied. Sound enough to wonder why you're so determined to acquire my property when the railroad has no interest in it. That caught him off guard. His eyes narrowed fractionally. I'm afraid I don't understand your meaning. The railroad's planned route doesn't cross most of the land you've been acquiring, I explained, watching his expression carefully. But it does cross my eastern canyons. The very area you've claimed is worthless. Porter and Henderson exchanged confused glances. This was clearly news to them. Where did you hear such nonsense? Clayton demanded, his genial facade cracking slightly. From someone who saw the official maps at Fort Whipple, I said. You've been lying to everyone, Mr. Clayton, to the ranchers you've pressured into selling, to your business associates, even to the town you claim to champion. Clayton's expression darkened. You've been listening to Indian fairy tales, Mrs. Wilson. A foolish mistake. Is it? Then explain why you're so desperate for my land that you'd resort to threats and destruction. A tense silence fell. I could almost see Clayton calculating his response, weighing how much he could admit in front of his associates. Business requires vision, he said finally. The ability to see possibilities others miss. Your ranch is strategically located for future development, for the railroad that's actually coming through my eastern canyons, I interrupted, the route you've known about all along while lying to everyone else. Clayton's patience visibly snapped. Enough! You're a woman alone trying to manage what you don't understand. I've been patient out of respect for your situation, but my patience has limits. As does mine, I replied evenly. My answer is no, Mr. Clayton. My ranch is not for sale. Not today, not next week, not ever. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to ensure only I could hear. Do you really think you can stand against me? Your so-called friends in town have already abandoned you. The Indians you've foolishly allied with will be driven back to their reservation once I report their presence here. You mean once you manufacture more lies about Navajo raids? I challenged. His smile chilled my blood. Who's to say what's a lie? A burned barn, missing cattle, a woman and her children tragically killed by savages? The territory's history is written in such stories. Is that a threat, Mr. Clayton? It's an inevitability, he replied softly. You've made your choice, Mrs. Wilson. Now you'll live or die with the consequences. Porter cleared his throat uncomfortably. Clayton, perhaps we should discuss this further in town. Mrs. Wilson clearly needs more time. "There's nothing to discuss," Clayton cut him off. "Mrs. Wilson has rejected a fair offer. What happens next is regrettable, but hardly surprising in such dangerous country." He turned to Edwards with a slight nod. The hired gun stepped forward, hand moving toward his holster. "I wouldn't," said a new voice from the doorway behind me. Sheriff Donovan stood in the entrance to my house, revolver drawn. Behind him emerged Judge Patterson, his silver hair and dignified bearing commanding immediate attention. From around the side of the house came Catherine Hollister, the newspaper editor's daughter, her face set with determination. Clayton's shock quickly transformed to calculated outrage. "Sheriff, thank goodness you're here. Mrs. Wilson has been making wild accusations." "Save it, Clayton," Donovan interrupted. "We heard everything, including your thinly veiled death threats." "Preposterous! We came here on legitimate business." "To threaten a widow and steal her property through intimidation," Judge Patterson finished for him. "I've suspected your methods for some time, Clayton, but lacked proof. Until now." Catherine stepped forward, notepad in hand. "I've recorded every word, Mr. Clayton. Tomorrow's edition of the Copper Canyon Chronicle will make interesting reading, don't you think?" Clayton's face contorted with fury. "You think this changes anything? It's your word against mine. I own. Half the businesses in town employ a quarter of its citizens. And that's why you've operated with impunity for so long," the judge acknowledged. "But threatening murder before witnesses crosses a line even your money can't erase." Edwards, sensing the situation deteriorating, made a sudden move for his gun. Sheriff Donovan's revolver swung toward him. "Don't," he warned. For a heartbeat, violence hung in the balance. Then Edwards slowly raised his hands. Clayton wasn't finished. His voice rose as he addressed his associates. "Are you fools? This was obviously a setup. And who will people believe? A respected businessman or a woman consorting with Indians?" "Perhaps they will believe this," came Gabriel Begay's voice as he stepped around the corner of the porch, dignified in his traditional dress. Behind him appeared more witnesses. Sarah Martinez, her father, and two elders from their community who had suffered Clayton's intimidation for years. Clayton's face drained of color as he realized how completely he'd been outmaneuvered. "This is absurd. Indians have no standing in territorial courts." "No," agreed Judge Patterson, "but I do, as does Sheriff Donovan, Miss Hollister, the Martinez family, and every other citizen you've wronged. Your empire of intimidation ends today, Clayton." It should have ended there, with justice finally overtaking corruption. But Clayton, like cornered rattlesnakes, was most dangerous in defeat. "Edwards, now!" he suddenly shouted. Several things happened at once. Edwards drew and fired at the sheriff, the bullet grazing Donovan's arm. Henderson, revealing himself truly Clayton's man, pulled a hidden derringer. I lunged for my shotgun as Clayton himself reached inside his jacket. Before any of them could fire again, the air filled with a sound like thunder. Dozens of mounted Navajo warriors appeared on every side, having emerged from their hiding places at Daniel's signal. Arrows were nocked on taut bowstrings, all pointed at Clayton and his men. Daniel rode forward, his painted Mustang prancing sideways with controlled energy. "Drop your weapons," he commanded, "or my warriors will ensure you never threaten anyone again." The tableau held for one breath, two. Then Henderson slowly placed his derringer on the porch. Edwards, after a tense moment, followed suit. Clayton, rage distorting his features, remained defiant. "You're dead, all of you," he snarled. "When the territorial governor hears about armed Indians threatening white citizens, when the governor hears about your land fraud, extortion, and attempted murder, you mean?" Catherine Hollister interrupted calmly. "My father may print your propaganda, Mr. Clayton, but my articles go directly to Phoenix and Santa Fe." Sheriff Donovan, pressing a kerchief to his wounded arm, gestured to his deputy who had emerged from inside the house. "Arrest them. All 4. Charges of conspiracy, attempted murder, and whatever else Judge Patterson can think of. As the deputy moved to comply, Clayton made one desperate move, pulling a small pistol from his coat and lunging toward me. "If I'm finished, so are you." An arrow thudded into the porch, planking an inch from his foot, a warning shot of supernatural precision. Daniel's voice rang out, "The next one won't miss." Clayton froze, his eyes darting between the arrow and the dozens of warriors surrounding him. Slowly, he dropped the pistol. The fight went out of him visibly, his shoulders slumping as the deputy secured his hands with iron cuffs. As he was led away, he shot me one final look of pure hatred. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," I replied, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "It ended the moment you mistook my compassion for weakness." The aftermath unfolded like scenes from a dream. The Navajo warriors, their dramatic entrance having achieved its purpose without violence, withdrew to a respectful distance. Sheriff Donovan had his wound bandaged by Sarah, while Judge Patterson spoke with Gabriel about the treaty violations Clayton had engineered. Catherine Hollister interviewed everyone, her pencil flying across paper as she documented a story that would indeed make remarkable reading. Her determination to expose Clayton's corruption might well heal the rift with her father, whose printing press would soon serve truth rather than manipulation. Daniel dismounted and approached me as I stood watching Clayton and his men being loaded into the sheriff's wagon. "You were magnificent," he said quietly. "Standing against him alone required more courage than most warriors ever find." I wasn't truly alone," I reminded him, touching the turquoise bracelet on my wrist. "I felt your presence every moment." His smile transformed his solemn face. "The bracelet carries only the strength you already possessed." Judge Patterson joined us, his expression thoughtful. "Mrs. Wilson, your actions today have exposed corruption that has plagued this territory for years. Clayton's arrest is just the beginning. His business dealings, land acquisitions, all will be scrutinized. Now, what about my ranch?" I asked. "Clayton claimed to have legal authority to pressure me into selling. Based on fraudulent documents, no doubt. I'll personally ensure your title remains secure." The judge glanced at Daniel. "As for the hunting rights in the eastern canyons, I believe honoring existing treaties is long overdue." "And the railroad?" Daniel inquired. "That's more complicated," Patterson admitted. "The Territorial Commission has already approved certain routes based on Clayton's influence. Changing them won't happen overnight." "But it will happen," Catherine interjected, joining our conversation. "Especially when evidence of bribery reaches the governor's desk." Sheriff Donovan approached, his wounded arm now properly bandaged. "Clayton's being taken to the county jail in Preston. He'll stand trial once we compile all the evidence." He tipped his hat to me. "Your plan worked better than I expected, Emily." "It wasn't just my plan," I acknowledged, glancing toward Gabriel, who stood in conversation with Sarah's father. "It took all of us, settlers and Navajo together, to expose the truth." "Speaking of truth," Catherine said, flipping to a new page in her notebook, "I'd like to document this unprecedented alliance. The story of a widow who gave water to a wounded Navajo, only to find warriors surrounding her ranch 2 days later, but as protectors, not enemies. It challenges everything people assume about relations between settlers and Indians." Daniel and I exchanged glances. "Some stories aren't ready to be told in full," he suggested diplomatically. "Perhaps not every detail," Catherine agreed. "But the territory needs new narratives, new possibilities. This could be the beginning of something important." She was right, I realized. What had begun as a desperate alliance against a common enemy had become something more, a bridge between worlds that had too long viewed each other only through the lens of fear and misunderstanding. As the excitement gradually settled, I found myself impatient for one thing above all else. I need to retrieve my children, I told Daniel. They must be worried sick. He nodded, understanding. I'll accompany you. Gabriel will remain here, with the others to ensure all is truly secure. We rode out together as afternoon shadows lengthened across the valley. The landscape looked different somehow, not changed physically, but transformed in meaning. Each ridge and wash now held stories of cooperation rather than conflict, of boundaries crossed rather than enforced. What will happen now? I asked, as we followed the narrow trail toward the hidden cave. With Clayton gone, will your people return to their traditional hunting grounds? For a time, Daniel replied. But the world changes around us, with or without Clayton. Railroads, towns, mines, each year brings more. I'm sorry, I said, suddenly ashamed of my place in that inexorable advance. Don't be. His voice held no bitterness. Change isn't always destruction. Sometimes it creates unexpected possibilities. He glanced at me, like a widow who sees a wounded enemy as a man deserving compassion. We crested a small rise, and the cave entrance came into view. Before we could announce ourselves, Ben burst from the opening, his face alight with excitement. "Mama! Daniel! Did you win? Did the bad men go away?" Lily emerged more cautiously, scanning my face for signs of trouble before allowing her own relief to show. I dismounted and gathered them both in my arms, breathing in their familiar scents, feeling the solid reality of them. "Yes," I answered, my voice thick with emotion. "The bad men are gone. We're safe now." Morning Sky appeared in the cave entrance, her serene expression revealing nothing of the anxiety the hours of waiting must have caused. "The children were brave," she said simply. "They honor their mother's strength." As we prepared to return to the ranch, Ben suddenly asked, "Can Mr. Daniel and the others stay with us now? He promised to show me how to make a bow, and I want to learn more Navajo words." The innocent question highlighted the complexity of our future. The immediate danger had passed, but what came next? The alliance forged in crisis couldn't simply continue unchanged in peace. Daniel answered before I could. "I will keep my promise to teach you, young Ben, but my people have their own homes, their own responsibilities." "But you'll visit?" Lily asked, her usual reserve giving way to genuine attachment. His eyes met mine over their heads, carrying a question I wasn't yet ready to answer. "With your mother's permission, yes. There is much still to share between our peoples." As we rode back to Sagebrush Ranch, the children chattering excitedly between us, I felt the turquoise bracelet warm against my skin. The desert sunset painted the mesas in fire and gold, transforming the harsh landscape into something breathtakingly beautiful. Like the land itself, I too had been transformed. By crisis faced, by courage found, by connections forged with those I had been taught to fear. Whatever came next, I would face it with new strength and new allies. My understanding of both danger and possibility forever expanded. The future stretched before us, uncertain but full of promise, like the desert after rain. The week following, Clayton's arrest brought changes to Desert Springs that few could have imagined. Word spread quickly throughout the territory. The newspaper articles Catherine Hollister wrote painted a vivid picture of corruption, exposed and unlikely alliances formed. Visitors began appearing at Sagebrush Ranch, some merely curious to see. The widow who had defied Richard Clayton, others genuinely interested in this unprecedented cooperation between settlers and Navajo. Sheriff Donovan rode out frequently, updating me on the legal proceedings against Clayton and his men. The evidence of fraud and intimidation mounted daily as other victims came forward, emboldened by Clayton's fall from power. The territorial governor has taken personal interest in the case, Donovan explained during one visit. Clayton's connections reach further than we realized, all the way to mining interests in Colorado and banking concerns in California. Will that help him escape justice? I asked, pouring coffee for the sheriff on my porch. Donovan shook his head. Just the opposite. The governor wants to make an example of him, show that the territory is no longer a lawless frontier where money trumps justice. He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. Though I suspect his sudden enthusiasm has more to do with the governor's political ambitions than moral outrage. I smiled wryly. As long as Clayton faces consequences, I'm not particular about the motivation. The sheriff studied me, his weathered face thoughtful. You've changed, Emily, not just since Thomas died, but these past weeks especially. Facing the possible loss of everything has a way of clarifying what matters, I replied, watching Lily and Ben playing with Morning Sky's children in the yard. The Navajo woman had continued visiting, bringing her 2 young sons who had quickly formed a friendship with mine. And what matters to you now? Donovan asked. I considered the question seriously. Building something lasting. Not just a ranch, but a place where my children can grow up understanding that courage and compassion aren't opposing forces. I touched Daniel's bracelet, which I continued to wear, and perhaps creating a small example of what could be possible between peoples who've been taught to fear each other. A worthy ambition, the sheriff acknowledged, though not an easy one. He was right. Despite our victory over Clayton, tensions persisted. Many in town remained suspicious of my association with the Navajo, viewing it as either a temporary necessity or evidence of my questionable judgment. When I rode into Copper Canyon for supplies, whispers followed me down the street, and several former acquaintances found pressing business elsewhere rather than greet me. Not everyone shunned us, however. Sarah and her family stood firmly as allies. Judge Patterson made a point of publicly demonstrating his support by inviting me and the children to Sunday dinner alongside Gabriel and Daniel. The judge's social standing forced even the most prejudiced citizens to reconsider their open hostility, though it didn't change their private opinions. Catherine Hollister became an unexpected friend, her articles gradually shifting the narrative about relations between settlers and indigenous peoples. She interviewed Gabriel at length about Navajo traditions and history, publishing pieces that humanized those who had long been portrayed as savage or primitive. Her father, initially resistant, discovered that these articles sold newspapers. People read them, whether from genuine interest or scandalized curiosity. Meanwhile, work continued at Sagebrush Ranch. The loss of the barn meant rebuilding before winter, and the Navajo warriors who had stood with us in crisis proved equally valuable. In peace, under Gabriel's direction, they helped construct a new barn, using a combination of settler and Navajo techniques. A sturdy framework of ponderosa pine, reinforced with methods that had withstood desert winds for centuries. Daniel taught me about desert plants that could sustain cattle through drought conditions, introducing varieties that required minimal water but provided essential nutrition. We experimented with irrigation systems based on ancient Navajo designs, capturing and directing the precious rainfall that occasionally swept through the valley. Your people have survived in this harsh land for generations, I remarked to him, as we worked together digging channels along the eastern fields. Our eastern farming methods fight against the desert instead of working with it. The land teaches patience, Daniel replied, a phrase I'd heard him use before but now understood more deeply. Those who listen survive. Those who impose their will without understanding often perish. These daily interactions brought a growing ease between us. Daniel's reserved nature gradually revealed layers of complexity, a keen intelligence, unexpected humor, and a deep spiritual connection to the land that transcended the simplistic, savage, or heathen labels my Eastern education had provided. I found myself watching him as he worked or spoke with the children, noticing the grace of his movements, the careful consideration he gave every question, the gentle strength that had initially drawn me to trust him when he appeared wounded on my doorstep. These thoughts troubled me at night, when I lay alone in the bed I had once shared with Thomas. Was it disloyal to feel this growing connection to a man so different from my husband? What future could possibly bridge our separate worlds? And even if we found personal resolution, how would society, both his and mine, respond to such a relationship? The questions remained unanswered as autumn approached, bringing cooler temperatures and the promise of winter on the horizon. Preparations intensified, wood gathered, food preserved, repairs completed before the first snow. The Navajo visited, less frequently as their own winter preparations demanded attention, though Gabriel maintained regular contact through messengers. Daniel continued coming every few days, ostensibly to check on the irrigation projects and fulfill his promise to teach Ben tracking skills. I noticed Lily watching us with her observant eyes when Daniel and I talked in the evenings, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. "Do you like Mr. Daniel, Mama?" she asked one night as I tucked her into bed. The directness of the question startled me. "Of course I do, Lily. He's been a good friend to us." "That's not what I mean," she persisted, with a child's bluntness. "Sarah's mama says you look at him like Mrs. Henderson looks at the new school teacher." Heat rose to my cheeks. "Mrs. Martinez should mind her own business," I said more sharply than intended. Lily was undeterred. "If you married Mr. Daniel, would that make him our new papa?" "Lily!" I gasped. We're not. Mr. Daniel is Navajo. His people have different customs, different traditions. But he speaks English and wears some white people clothes sometimes," she reasoned, "and you wear his bracelet every day." I touched the turquoise and silver at my wrist automatically. "It's complicated, Lily. Adults can be friends without marrying." She looked unconvinced, but allowed me to change the subject to her lessons. Later, alone in the kitchen, I confronted the reality that my daughter had voiced the very questions I'd been avoiding. Questions that demanded resolution. One way or another, the opportunity came sooner than expected. Reports reached us of a delegation from Washington arriving at Fort Whipple to renegotiate treaties with various tribes, including the Navajo. Gabriel sent word that he would be traveling to meet them, and asked if Daniel and I would accompany him, Daniel as translator and me as a witness to recent events that demonstrated peaceful cooperation was possible. "Your presence would lend weight to our position," Gabriel's message explained. "A respected settler willing to speak for Navajo interests will surprise the government men, perhaps open their minds to new possibilities." The request honored me deeply, but also raised practical concerns. "I can't leave the children for so long," I told Daniel when he delivered Gabriel's message personally. The journey to Fort Whipple would take at least 5 days round trip. "Sarah has offered to stay with them," he replied. "Gabriel spoke with her before sending me." I raised an eyebrow. "You all seem to have arranged everything without consulting me." Daniel's expression remained serious. "We would not presume to decide for you. The choice is yours, but your voice could make a difference for my people's future." Put that way, how could I refuse? My testimony might help secure treaty protections for the very people who had saved my ranch and possibly my life. Beyond that, the journey would provide uninterrupted time with Daniel, a chance to address the unspoken questions between us. The decision made, preparations moved quickly. Sarah arrived with her young daughter to stay at the ranch, bringing extra supplies and boundless energy. The children, excited by the adventure of having friends stay over, seemed less concerned about my departure than I had feared. "You'll be careful, Mama?" Lily asked as I packed my saddlebags. "Very careful," I promised, hugging her close. "And I'll bring you both something special from the fort." Ben was more interested in practical matters. Will you ride with the Navajo horses? Will you sleep in a Navajo tent? They're called hogans, I corrected gently. And yes, I expect I'll learn many new things about Navajo ways. The morning of our departure dawned crisp and clear. Gabriel arrived with a small delegation of tribal elders and warriors, their horses adorned with traditional regalia appropriate for meeting government officials. Daniel rode slightly apart, dressed in a unique combination of buckskin and Western clothing that seemed to symbolize his position bridging two worlds. As we set out, I felt both apprehension and exhilaration. This journey represented my first significant absence from the ranch and children since Thomas died, but also offered an opportunity to advocate for justice beyond my personal concerns. Our route took us northwest through increasingly dramatic landscapes, towering mesas, deep canyons, vast expanses of desert blooming with unexpected life. Gabriel set a steady pace, mindful of the varying experience levels of our party. Around evening campfires, the elders shared stories and songs, some of which Daniel translated for me, others deemed too sacred for outside ears. I found myself welcomed with genuine warmth, treated neither as an interloper nor a curiosity, but as a valued ally. My questions about Navajo customs were answered patiently, and in turn, I explained aspects of settler society that puzzled them. Your people build permanent structures, one elder observed, yet you tear down mountains and forests that have stood since time began. How is this balanced thinking? Such questions challenged my assumptions about progress and civilization more effectively than any scholarly debate. I didn't always have satisfactory answers, but the conversations broadened my understanding in ways I hadn't anticipated. On the third night, as others slept, Daniel and I sat beside the dying embers of the fire. The stars stretched overhead in dazzling profusion, more brilliant than I had ever seen them. When I was a child, Daniel said quietly, my mother told me that stars are windows in the sky where the songs of ancestors shine through. I would lie awake trying to match each point of light to a particular song. It's a beautiful thought, I replied. Better than what my astronomy book taught about burning gases millions of miles away. Perhaps both can be true, he suggested. Science explains how, but not always why. The firelight cast his profile in copper and shadow, highlighting the strong lines of his face. Without conscious decision, I found myself asking the question that had lingered between us for weeks. What happens after Fort Whipple, Daniel, when treaties are signed and life returns to what people call normal? He turned to face me, his dark eyes reflecting pinpoints of starlight. What do you wish to happen, Emily Wilson? The directness of his question demanded equal honesty. I don't know. These past months have changed everything I thought I understood about this territory, about your people. I hesitated, then added, about myself. Change can bring clarity or confusion, he observed, sometimes both together. Like my feelings for you, I admitted, the words finally finding voice. I respect you, trust you, feel drawn to you in ways I can't fully explain, but I don't see how. How a Navajo man and a white widow could find a shared path. He finished when I faltered. Our worlds have different expectations, different definitions of what's possible, I said. Even if we personally overcame those differences, what would it mean for your standing among your people, for my children's acceptance in town? Daniel was silent for a long moment, his gaze returning to the star-filled sky. Among my mother's people, there is a ceremony called the Blessing Way. It marks transitions, birth, coming of age, healing. Its purpose is not to change what is, but to ensure balance and harmony as we move into what will be. He looked back at me. Perhaps we need not decide everything tonight. Perhaps our path reveals itself step by step, like tracks in the desert. His wisdom calmed my racing thoughts. We didn't need to solve everything at once, to have answers for questions that life had not yet fully asked. For now, it was enough to acknowledge the connection between us and remain open to its evolution. "Tell me more about the Blessing Way," I said, settling more comfortably beside him. As the night deepened around us, Daniel shared stories of his people's ceremonies and beliefs. I found myself imagining a life that embraced both worlds rather than choosing between them. A future, neither fully Navajo nor entirely settler, but something new and yet unwritten. We reached Fort Whipple on the fourth day, its military precision a stark contrast to the flowing natural rhythms of our journey. The fort stood as a symbol of American expansion, ordered, regimented, imposing its grid-like structure on the organic landscape. Guards eyed our approaching party with suspicion despite our expected arrival, hands resting near weapons until official recognition was established. The government delegation had already been at the fort for several days, meeting with representatives from various tribes. They were housed in the commandant's quarters while we were assigned space in auxiliary buildings, clean but clearly segregated from the white officials. "Standard procedure," explained the young lieutenant who escorted us. "Different accommodations for different, categories of visitors." The condescension in his tone made my shoulders tense, but Gabriel and the elders accepted the arrangement with dignified indifference. Only Daniel's slight frown revealed his awareness of the implicit insult. "I should be housed with my people," I told the lieutenant firmly. "My testimony concerns our shared experiences." The officer blinked in surprise. "Ma'am, that wouldn't be appropriate. As a white woman, as a witness invited by Chief Begay," I interrupted. "My place is with those who extended that invitation." My insistence created a minor diplomatic incident. The fort's commandant was summoned, followed by the lead negotiator from Washington, a Senator Harrington whose formal attire seemed ridiculous in the frontier setting. After considerable discussion conducted as though I weren't present, a compromise was reached. I would be given separate quarters adjacent to the Navajo delegation, maintaining both propriety and proximity. Daniel caught my eye as the arrangements concluded, a ghost of a smile playing at his lips. "You continue to surprise them," he murmured as we walked toward our assigned buildings. "They don't know what category fits you anymore." "Good," I replied. "Perhaps categories themselves are part of the problem." That evening, we were invited to a formal dinner with the government officials, a calculated show of civilization meant to impress the savage delegates. Gabrielle and the elders attended with perfect composure, navigating unfamiliar silver and crystal with the same dignified presence they brought to Navajo councils. Daniel moved between worlds with practiced ease, his perfect English and understanding of both cultures making him invaluable as more than merely a translator. I watched Senator Harrington studying him with growing curiosity throughout the meal. Finally, the senator addressed him directly. "You speak remarkably well, Mr. Yazzie. Where did you receive your education?" "My mother taught me English from childhood," Daniel replied evenly. "Later I spent 2 years at a missionary school in Santa Fe." "Ah, excellent." Harrington nodded with satisfaction. "Then you understand the advantages of American educational methods. Progress through proper training." "I understand many paths to knowledge exist," Daniel answered, "each with value and limitation." The senator's expression suggested this wasn't the grateful acknowledgement he expected. He turned to me, perhaps seeking safer conversation. "And you, Mrs. Wilson? The commandant tells me you've had quite an unusual experience with our Navajo friends here. Something about water and warriors." All eyes turned to me, and I realized this casual dinner conversation would set the tone for the formal negotiations to follow. My response needed to balance truth with diplomatic sensitivity. I believe in judging people by their actions, Senator, not by assigned categories. I began carefully. When I needed help against those who threatened my ranch and children, these men beside you risked their lives and standing to provide it. That tells me more about character than any label of savage or civilized ever could. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. The senator's aide leaned forward with a tight smile. A charming anecdote, Mrs. Wilson, but surely you recognize that individual exceptions don't change the broader necessities of progress and proper land management. On the contrary, I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I believe individual experiences are precisely what should inform policy. Treaties written by those who've never lived alongside the people affected will always fail to create lasting peace. Gabriel spoke then, his deep voice commanding attention despite its measured tone. Tomorrow, Senator, you will offer words on paper. Such words have been offered before, then broken when gold or water or passage was discovered on our lands. Mrs. Wilson stands here because when words between us were honored on both sides, something new became possible. The senator studied us with shrewd political eyes. You speak eloquently, Chief Begay, but the march of civilization cannot be halted for sentiment. The reservation boundaries established in previous treaties must be adjusted to accommodate territorial development. You mean reduced, Daniel translated bluntly. Each new treaty offers less land, more restrictions, fewer rights. In exchange for education, protection, and the benefits of modern society, Harrington countered. I felt a surge of frustration at his practiced rhetoric. Senator, have you ever visited the Navajo reservation, seen these benefits firsthand? His slight hesitation answered before his words did. My schedule has not permitted extensive tours, but my office receives regular reports. Then, perhaps before drafting new boundaries on paper, I suggested, you might benefit from witnessing the reality of life under existing treaties, understanding what is being asked of people who have called this land home for countless generations. The conversation shifted to less confrontational topics after that, but I noticed the senator watching me with calculating interest for the remainder of the evening. As we left the commandant's house, he approached me directly. Mrs. Wilson, might I have a word in private tomorrow before the formal negotiations begin? I find your perspective intriguing. I glanced at Gabriel, who nodded slightly. Of course, Senator. I'd be happy to share my observations in more detail. That night, unable to sleep in the unfamiliar quarters, I stepped outside to breathe the cool desert air. The fort was mostly dark, with only sentry lanterns burning at regular intervals. Along the walls, Daniel emerged from the shadows nearby, apparently similarly restless. You spoke well tonight, he said quietly. Few settlers would challenge a senator so directly. I simply told the truth as I've experienced it, I replied, though I doubt it will significantly change the outcome tomorrow. Daniel leaned against the rough wooden wall beside me. Perhaps not immediately, but truth has power beyond the moment it's spoken. Seeds planted today may grow in unexpected seasons. His poetic metaphor reminded me of the distance between our worldviews, his perspective shaped by a culture that thought in generations and natural cycles, mine formed in a society fixated on immediate results and constant expansion. What do you hope for from these negotiations? I asked him. His expression grew contemplative in the moonlight. Protection of sacred sites, hunting rights in traditional territories, education that doesn't require erasing our identity. He paused. And recognition that we are not obstacles to be removed from the path of progress, but people with our own valid vision of the future. The simplicity and profound reasonableness of these desires highlighted the injustice of their continued denial. I reached for his hand in the darkness, our fingers intertwining naturally. Tomorrow I'll speak those truths to Senator Harrington, I promised, whether he hears them or not. Daniel's hand tightened around mine. Having you stand with us already changes what's possible, Emily Wilson. Whatever comes tomorrow, remember that. We stood silently under the vast desert sky, hands joined between worlds, while the sentries paced the walls of a fort that suddenly seemed less permanent against the ancient landscape surrounding it. Morning arrived with military precision at Fort Whipple. Bugle calls, marching drills, and the methodical raising of the flag. I rose early, preparing carefully for my meeting with Senator Harrington. The blue dress I'd packed seemed suddenly inadequate for the occasion, but it was the best I had, a remnant of my Eastern life now adapted to Western purpose. Gabriel and Daniel met me outside my quarters, both dressed in their finest traditional attire. The contrast between Gabriel's full ceremonial appearance and Daniel's thoughtful blend of cultures struck me anew. The senator's aide came at dawn. Gabriel informed me, "You're expected at the commandant's office at 9 o'clock. Daniel studied my expression. "You're concerned about meeting him alone." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. Politicians rarely seek private conversations without ulterior motives. "Trust your instincts," Gabriel advised. "You've faced more dangerous men than Washington senators." His confidence bolstered mine. I touched the turquoise bracelet at my wrist, drawing strength from its smooth stones and the connection it represented. "I'll see you both at the treaty negotiations afterward." The commandant's office exuded military austerity. Maps on the walls, reports stacked in precise alignment, a polished desk that had clearly never known the chaos of family life. Senator Harrington rose as I entered, his political smile practiced, but not entirely insincere. "Mrs. Wilson, thank you for making time. Please, sit." He gestured to a chair positioned across from the commandant's desk, which he had apparently commandeered. "I appreciate your interest in my perspective, Senator," I replied, settling my skirts carefully, "though I'm curious what specifically you wish to discuss." He regarded me thoughtfully. "You present a fascinating case study, Mrs. Wilson. A woman of obvious education and refinement, yet you've aligned yourself with the very populations most settlers consider a threat. I aligned myself with people who treated me with honor when others did not," I corrected. "Their heritage was less relevant than their actions." "Indeed." He steepled his fingers. "That's precisely what intrigues me. You've experienced firsthand what peaceful coexistence might look like." He leaned forward slightly. "Tell me honestly, do you believe such arrangements could work more broadly? Or is your situation merely an exceptional case?" The question seemed genuine, sparking a flicker of hope that he might actually listen. "I believe it's both exceptional and illustrative, Senator. Exceptional because circumstances forced cooperation when prejudice might otherwise have prevented it. Illustrative because it demonstrates what's possible when people engage as individuals rather than as categories." Fascinating perspective. He rose, pacing to the window overlooking the fort's parade ground. "The challenge, of course, is translating individual experiences into policy affecting thousands. Perhaps that's the fundamental flaw," I suggested. "Policies treating thousands as identical rather than recognizing diverse communities with different needs." He turned, eyebrows raised. "You suggest we negotiate separate treaties with each band, each settlement? Practically impossible, Mrs. Wilson. Not separate treaties, perhaps, but flexible frameworks that allow for regional variations." I hadn't realized I held such specific views until articulating them. The Navajo relationship with land differs from Apache or Hopi. Treating them as interchangeable ensures treaties that satisfy no one. Harrington regarded me with new interest. "You've given this considerable thought." "Only recently," I admitted. "When abstract policy suddenly affects your daily survival, It clarifies. Your thinking. He returned to his seat, expression contemplative. Mrs. Wilson, would you consider a more formal advisory role? The territorial governor is establishing a commission on Indian affairs. Someone with your unique experience could provide valuable insights. The offer startled me. I'm just a rancher, Senator. I have no political qualifications. Precisely why your perspective matters. Too many decisions are made by career bureaucrats who've never set foot in the territories they administrate. His smile seemed genuinely warm now. Think about it. A stipend would be provided naturally. The potential implications bloomed in my mind. A voice in policies affecting both settlers and indigenous peoples. Income to support my children without selling the ranch. Legitimacy in the community that had begun to ostracize me. Yet something in his too smooth presentation raised my guard. What would this role entail exactly? Quarterly reports, occasional, testimony in Phoenix or Santa Fe, perhaps yearly travel to Washington. He made a dismissive gesture. Nothing that would take you from your children for extended periods. And my association with the Navajo. Would that be considered an asset or a liability? His hesitation told me everything. Your unique relationships would provide valuable cultural context, but the Commission's recommendations must prioritize territorial development and security. There it was, the true purpose of his offer. They wanted to use me, my unusual position between worlds, to create the appearance of balanced policy while pursuing the same relentless expansion. My voice would legitimize decisions already determined. Senator Harrington, I said carefully, I appreciate your offer, but I must decline. My testimony today will reflect my honest observations, not predetermined conclusions. His smile tightened, almost imperceptibly. Of course, though I hope you'll reconsider, such opportunities for women in governance are exceedingly rare, as are opportunities for genuine cooperation between settlers and indigenous peoples. I countered, rising to leave. I'd rather pursue the latter, even without official sanction. His expression revealed grudging respect. You're an unusual woman, Mrs. Wilson. I expect we'll hear more of you in coming years. I wasn't certain whether this was compliment or warning. Either way, I left his office with my integrity intact, but wondering if I'd just declined the chance to effect real change. Daniel was waiting outside, his presence reassuring as we walked toward the council chamber where the negotiations would take place. The senator offered me a position, I explained briefly, on a territorial commission. Daniel's expression remained carefully neutral. But you refused. It wasn't what it appeared. They wanted a token voice, not genuine input. He nodded, unsurprised. Such has been our experience with government commissions. The council chamber held a long table where the delegation from Washington sat on one side, facing representatives from multiple tribes on the other, Navajo, Apache, Hopi, and others. The segregation was visual and symbolic, reflecting the fundamental imbalance of the proceedings. I was directed to a chair slightly apart from both groups, my unusual status acknowledged in my physical positioning. For hours, I listened as tribal leaders presented concerns, requests, and grievances, only to receive diplomatic deflections or outright refusals from the government representatives. The patterns became painfully clear. Expansion justified as progress, broken promises rationalized as necessary adjustments, and cultural destruction framed as benevolent assimilation. When Gabriel spoke of sacred sites being desecrated, the response focused on mineral resources too valuable to leave undeveloped. When Apache leaders described starvation on reservations too small and arid for traditional food gathering, they were told to adopt farming practices unsuited to their land. When Daniel translated a Hopi elder's plea to preserve their children's language and customs, Education officials extolled the virtues of boarding schools that would kill the Indian to save the man. Throughout it all, Senator Harrington maintained an expression of thoughtful concern while signing documents that altered boundaries, restricted movement, and further confined indigenous peoples to increasingly marginal lands. When finally called to testify, I spoke from my heart about what I had witnessed, both the casual cruelty of men like Clayton and the profound honor I had experienced among the Navajo. I described the sustainable practices I had learned from Daniel, techniques for desert survival that generations of white settlers might have benefited from had they approached indigenous peoples as teachers rather than obstacles. The railroad will come, and with it more settlers, I acknowledged. But we have choices about how this expansion proceeds. We can continue pushing native peoples to ever smaller, less viable territories until desperation forces conflict, or we can create frameworks for genuine coexistence where knowledge and resources are shared rather than seized. Senator Harrington listened with practiced attention, then thanked me for my passionate perspective before proceeding exactly as he had intended all along. By late afternoon, new treaties had been signed, treaties that would be broken when convenient, amended when profitable, and enforced selectively to benefit territorial expansion. As we left the fort that evening, I felt a weight of futility. Nothing changed, I said to Daniel as we prepared for the journey home. All those words, all those promises, and nothing changed. Not today, he agreed, securing packs on his horse. But change rarely happens in council chambers. It happens in countless small moments between people, like a woman giving water to a wounded stranger. His perspective granted me a sliver of hope. Perhaps our testimony, though seemingly ignored, had planted seeds in someone's consciousness. Perhaps one of the military officers or government clerks had truly listened and would carry those insights forward. The return journey felt different, heavier with responsibility, but also deeper in connection. The Navajo elders, though disappointed by the negotiations' outcome, accepted it with a patience born from long experience with broken treaties. Their focus turned to practical matters, preparing their people for further restrictions, preserving essential traditions despite shrinking territories, finding paths to survive within ever-narrowing constraints. I admired their resilience while mourning the injustice that necessitated it. Each night around the campfire, their stories and songs continued, an act of cultural persistence more powerful than any government policy. I understood now that their strength lay not in fighting an unwinnable war against expansion, but in maintaining identity and knowledge through generations of change. On our third night returning home, Daniel and I again found ourselves alone by the dying embers after others had retired. The question of our future, temporarily set aside during the journey to Fort Whipple, resurfaced between us. The Senator's commission would have provided you security, Daniel observed, financial support for your children. At the cost of my conscience, I replied, and possibly my freedom to associate with you and your people. He studied the glowing coals thoughtfully. My uncle believes difficult times approach. The new treaties will push more of our people onto reservation. Land insufficient for our needs. Resistance may come from younger warriors, unwilling to accept further confinement. The implication was clear. Our fragile bridge between worlds could collapse under external pressures neither of us controlled. What will you do? I asked. Gabriel has asked me to teach our children both traditions, our own and yours. Knowledge of both worlds may help them navigate what comes. His gaze met mine. And you, Emily Wilson, what path will you choose? The question demanded honesty I had been avoiding. My children need stability, education. The ranch provides a home, but isn't yet profitable enough to secure their future. I hesitated, then added, "and I need purpose beyond mere survival." "Perhaps these needs are not separate," Daniel suggested. "Your ranch lies at the border between worlds. It could become a place of meeting, of learning in both directions." The idea resonated immediately, not as an abstract concept, but as a practical vision. Sagebrush Ranch could serve as neutral ground where Navajo children learned English and arithmetic, while settler children learned desert survival and sustainable practices. A place where traditional medicine could be exchanged with modern techniques, creating healthcare methods uniquely suited to territorial conditions. "A school," I mused aloud. "Not like the government boarding schools that strip away identity, but one that honors both knowledge systems." Daniel nodded, his expression animated by the possibility. "The railroad will bring changes, new people, new ideas. Some will come with Clayton's mindset of conquest, but others might seek genuine understanding if given the opportunity." "The town would resist," I cautioned. "Many still see me as a traitor for associating with the Navajo at all." "Some would," he acknowledged. "Others might gradually see value in children prepared to thrive in the territory as it actually exists, not as Eastern ideals imagine it." As we talked into the night, the vision expanded and clarified, a practical but radical reimagining of what education at the frontier could become. By morning, what had begun as tentative exploration had crystallized into determined purpose. When we shared the concept with Gabriel and the elders, they responded with thoughtful consideration rather than immediate rejection. "Such a place could preserve knowledge that might otherwise be lost," Gabriel observed. "But it would require trust on both sides, a rare commodity between our peoples. Trust begins with individuals before it spreads to communities," I replied. "We've already taken those first steps." The remainder of our journey passed in animated discussion of possibilities, challenges, and practical considerations. By the time the familiar silhouette of Sagebrush Ranch appeared on the horizon, I felt a sense of homecoming, deeper than mere return to physical place. I was returning with purpose, with vision, with connection to this harsh, beautiful land and its original inhabitants in ways I had never anticipated. As we crested the final hill, I saw Sarah standing in the yard with Lily and Ben, scanning anxiously for our approach. The children spotted us first, running toward us with excited shouts that carried on the desert air. I urged my horse forward, eager to embrace them after the longest separation we had experienced since Thomas's death. "Mama!" Ben cried as I swung down from the saddle. "You missed everything. There was a coyote in the chicken coop and Sarah shot at it but missed. And then Mr. Martinez came and fixed the big window that was stuck, and I learned to count to 20 in Spanish." I laughed, gathering him close, breathing in his familiar scent of soap and sunshine. "That does sound like everything important, Ben." Lily approached more sedately, studying my face before allowing herself to be embraced. "Did you help the Navajo, Mama? Did the government men listen?" Her perceptiveness caught me off guard. "They listened, Lily, but listening doesn't always mean changing. We'll need to be patient and persistent." She nodded solemnly, then turned to greet Daniel. With unexpected confidence, speaking a Navajo phrase morning sky must have taught her. His face brightened with surprise and pleasure as he responded gently in his language. Sarah embraced me with evident relief. "Thank God you're back safely. There's been talk in town, rumors that the Navajo delegation might be detained at Fort Whipple or worse." "The military wouldn't risk such provocation," I reassured her, though the possibility hadn't seemed entirely implausible given the tension during negotiations. "Clayton's associates are stirring trouble," she explained in lowered tones as we walked toward the house. "With him awaiting trial, they're trying to maintain his influence through fear and rumor." Gabriel and the other Navajo prepared to continue their journey home, but Daniel lingered. As the children dragged me toward the house to show me their Accomplishments during my absence, I caught his glance. A question, a possibility, a future not yet determined, but suddenly imaginable. "Will you stay?" I asked simply. "For the evening meal," he replied with a slight smile, "for longer discussions after the children sleep, for the beginning of what comes next." It wasn't a declaration of permanent commitment from either of us. Too many complexities remained unresolved. Too many external pressures threatened our fragile understanding. But it was a promise to continue walking the path together, step by step, discovering its direction through the journey itself. That night, seated around my kitchen table with Daniel, Sarah, and the children, I felt the first genuine sense of possibility since Thomas's death. The path ahead would be difficult, creating a place of cross-cultural learning in a territory still defined by conflict and prejudice, facing resistance from both settler society and traditional Navajo who preferred separation to integration, securing funding without compromising our vision. Yet as I watched Ben proudly counting in Spanish while Lily showed Daniel her attempt at Navajo weaving, I glimpsed the future we might build. Not perfect harmony, but genuine respect born from shared knowledge. Not erasing differences, but creating space where differences enriched rather than divided. The desert sunset painted my modest ranch house in gold and crimson, transforming the humble structure into something luminous against the darkening sky. Like the land itself, I had been changed by fire and storm, becoming something I could never have imagined when I first arrived in this territory. I had given water to a wounded stranger, an act of simple humanity. In return, I had received protection, wisdom, purpose, and perhaps even love. The warriors who had surrounded my ranch had brought not the death I initially feared, but life in all its complex possibility, the chance to build something new in this ancient land. As stars emerged above Sagebrush Ranch, I felt for the first time that I truly belonged to this place, not as its conqueror or even its steward, but as another thread in its enduring tapestry, weaving my small pattern into a design far older and greater than myself. It was enough. It was everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.